Yesterday we spoke about. We're learning now the Dvar Malchut of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave right at the end of 1991. And the Rebbe is talking about Moshiach and how close Moshiach is, and how desperately we need the revelation of Moshiach, and how Moshiach basically has already finished all of the work that he has to do, and that now we just have to open up our eyes and see what's going on. And the Rebbe brings an example of France. France. So the Rebbe said the fact that nowadays in France there are actually institutions of learning Torah, and especially learning Chassidut in France itself, this is an amazing sign that the world is ready for Mashiach, and that the world is already in Mashiach. Just a small a preface over here, what we're talking about. When the Jews got out of Egypt, so it was a tremendous, that's the basis of Judaism, right? The first of the 10 commandments, I am God that took you out of Egypt. It was a tremendous, tremendous novelty, to the degree that I don't think that there's any history book in the world that tells the story of the Jews getting out of Egypt. And if it does, it doesn't do it accurately. Any of the people learn history in university, they learn in the higher education, as people are professors, they write books about it. I don't think, listen, I haven't really been an academic for a long, long time, but in university anyway, for a long time. But as far as I know, all these big history books and whatever it is, there's the story of God taking all the Jews out of Egypt and giving them his Torah and splitting the sea. It's just so fantastic and unrealistic, and also seemingly unimportant. Right? Even to the Jews that it happened to back then, it was not important, right? God took them out of Egypt with all the 10 plagues and the miracles, and this, gave them the Torah, and 40 days later they went exactly the opposite of what God said. Don't worship the golden calf. Everybody worshiped the golden calf. Passively, actively, right? Only the men did it. It was enough that God wanted to wipe out all the Jewish people. Wanted to wipe them out. Moses had to stand and say, no, God, don't do it, and wipe me out if you want to wipe them out. So when God took the Jews out of Egypt, it was amazing, amazing thing, but that wasn't the end of it. Because we see that the Jews, with all the miracles that they saw, first of all, they worshiped the golden calf. Then after that, they refused to enter Israel. Then, and all this time, they wanted to go back to Egypt. Let's go back, right? And then there was Korach, made all the Jewish people rebel against Moses. So something was missing over there. What happened? The whole world respected the Jews. The whole world feared the Jews. The whole world knew that the God, the creator of the universe, had chosen the Jews, and he defeated Egypt. Egypt then was the master of the whole world. It says that Paro ruled the whole world. Melech B'kippah, it says. Ruled over the whole world. And everyone knew that the Jews had we say in the song of the Jews sing after they went up, everyone, everyone was afraid in the world of the Jews. And what did the Jews do? They worshiped the golden calf. They didn't want to go into Israel. They wanted to go back there. What happened? What was missing? What was missing? These massive, big, advertised changes occurred, and it didn't impress the Jews. What happened? What's the point? No wonder that God wanted to wipe them all out. No wonder, right? After all that, and the Jews the non-Jews were supporting the Jews. They were helping the Jews. Said, "No, leave me alone. I don't want to be Jewish anymore. I want to be like you." What happened? And so the answer is that something inside, like we just finished learning in Likkutei Torah, was lacking. This unconditional love of God was lacking. And sometimes when it's difficult, when it's hard, as this love becomes revealed, like we just finished. But when things are good, sometimes this love of God, it just sort of, we don't need it anymore. We don't need it. I'm doing okay on my own. When things are good. So what's supposed to be the ideal? Right? The ideal is supposed to be that everything is good, and nevertheless, we don't pay any attention to the good. We serve the creator of the universe just like they did in Egypt, just like the Jews did in the worst situations possible. But they serve the creator. Like that we serve God from just between us and God. What the world does is not up to me. Whether it's good, the world is good to us, it's bad to us. That's not my business. The thing that's to me is I want to serve the essence of God. My whole attitude changes. Attitude changes. Says the Rebbe, that was especially evident in the first Rebbe of Chabad with Napoleon. Napoleon ruled over almost the whole world. He conquered nation after nation, and Napoleon promised, and he would have come across with his promises, that if he wins, it's going to be good for the Jews physically. And all of the Jewish leaders were in favor of Napoleon. Right? The Tsar and all the other governments, they were all Christian and they were all oppressive and they hated the Jews and they wanted the Jews. They spoke against the Jews. And Napoleon only had good things to say about the Jews, only good things. He wanted to make the state of Israel. Napoleon was really good with the Jews. The Alter Rebbe, all of the Jewish leaders favored Napoleon. The Rebbe of Chabad was the only one. He vehemently opposed Napoleon. He even sent spies to spy on Napoleon to assure Napoleon's defeat. All of the other great leaders, Chabad was the only one that opposed Napoleon. How could that be such a thing? Why did that? So we're going to see in 1 second that that's the whole point. When the Jews got out of Egypt, it was really good for the Jews. It was really good for them. But on the other hand, inside the Jews, they were satisfied. That's good. The world is good. I'm good. I'm good. The Rebbe wanted it to be good for the Jews. He didn't want the Jews to suffer. 100% did not want Jews. No way. And he didn't want the benefits that come from suffering. Suffering is a terrible thing. But he knew that the loss that's going to come from comfort is worse than the loss that comes from discomfort. He didn't want Jews to suffer, but he knew that if Jews suffer, so they lose their comfort, they lose that terrible thing. But it's not. But it's not as bad as what they lose when things are good. When things are good, they become complacent. They don't have a fire for love. It's like being in heaven, like the soul when it's in heaven before it comes to the world. So the purpose of Chabad is to arouse the essence of the soul, something which Moses did not do. Only Moshiach is going to do. So that's what the idea of conquering France. Conquering France. We can understand this by the change in the relationship between the Jewish people to France regarding Shehoya Bedoro when it was in the time of the Alter Rebbe. What was in the time of the Alter Rebbe? The first Rebbe. It's known that in the time of the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe, that there was a war between Napoleon, the French man, and Tzorer, Alexander, and the evil Tsar Alexander. As the Alter Rebbe said, not like Gadol Acher, not like all the other great leaders of Israel. 1 second. I have to look and see this. Okay. Like all the other great leaders of Israel, here the Rebbe only says that there's one, but Shelatova Mitzvah Maruchni Shel Bnei Israel B'Inyan Yirat Shamayim Adif Sharusia. The Alter Rebbe decided that no, as far as serving God goes, it was better if the Tsar won, even though the Tsar was an evil, terrible, disgusting person, had no qualifications to be king. He was just an evil despot. But nevertheless, it was better that he should rule than Napoleon, who was a nice guy, and he was a real ruler, and he had decisions, and he made fantastic decisions that he made in government and in society and in war. And therefore, he decided that it would be better that Russia should win, and France should lose. Ubelashon HaKodesh in his language, Im Yinatzech Beit Pei. Beit Pei is Bonaparte. Bonaparte, that was his name. If Bonaparte would win, Yarbu Osher B'Yisrael, then the wealth of the Jewish people will be increased. V'yorim Kiranam, and the glory of the Jewish people will be elevated. Aval Yitpardu V'Yitvachku Libam, but the hearts of the Jewish people will be separated from their Father in heaven. Before Napoleon, it was almost unheard of that there was intermarriage. Very rare. It happened, of course, in the Talmud it tells stories, but it's very rare that Jewish women married non-Jewish men. And the other way around also. It was very rare. It was a tremendous exception. And Napoleon, he started to change that trend. The soldiers, they're handsome, dashing, soldiers, and they conquered the hearts of the Jewish women. So therefore, if Napoleon wins, the hearts of the Jewish people will be separated from their Father in heaven. And if Alexander wins, even though that there will be poverty among the Jewish people, and the glory of the Jewish people will descend, but they will be joined, and their hearts will be joined to their Father in heaven. The reason for this was that France and Napoleon at the head, Yitzaga Az, they carried the banner of chofesh, of freedom, right? That was liberty, fraternity, equality, liberty. Mikol and Yanidat Vemuna, freedom from everything, freedom from any restraints in God. And the Jews like that. The Jews like it. You can do whatever you want to. You're the boss. The Klipazu, this was the how do you say, the evil force of Napoleon of France. Shivta et Tokef Aklipa, that this was an expression of the ultimate, the evil, Klippa, and Dina Kasha, and severe judgment of God. Machmat, because of a gaiva v'itnasut, because of the egotism and the haughtiness, the person relied on his own powers to say, that my power and my ability brought me success. Excuse me. And you remove from himself any awareness of God or trust in God, etc. This is something like Klippas Sancheriv. This is very similar also. Napoleon was very similar. The story with Napoleon was very similar to that of the Greeks in Hanukkah. The Greeks also represented the dominance of pleasure, physical pleasure. You do what you want to, with whoever you want to, whenever you want to. Pleasure, art, music, drama. And they had all these statues. The Greeks were really big at that stuff. And the Jews loved it. Sports. But the Jews, Kefishim of war, like it's explained in the second Rebbe of Chabad, Lo Rak Inyan Lifnei Shah. It wasn't a temporary thing. This is what Napoleon represented and what the Greeks represented. Here we're talking about Napoleon. He represented a power which is it's constant in all the generations. That's basically what brought Adam to eat from the tree. God said, don't do it, but Adam said, but I want to do it. Why should I not? Where does my desires come from? From God. The Rebbe said in one mimer that that's the explanation where God made man in his image means that every man thinks that they're God. This was something which is relevant to all times and all places afterwards. The war with Napoleon wasn't just a one-time thing. This is a constant theme in mankind, kiyadu, like it's known in history books, shemahapecha tzarpatit, that the French Revolution, and by means of that French Revolution, there came out from that Napoleon, after a few years later, was gam hapecha ideologit. It was not just a political revolution, it was an ideological revolution. In klali shehevi imo shino ikri ba'olam kulu, and it brought to the whole world a change. What was the change? That before the French Revolution, France was a Catholic country, totally. And the revolution, the French Revolution, brought freedom of expression, freedom of the right. The French Revolution was one of the main the historical events. The modern world was based on it until this very day. French Revolution, the emphasis on culture. I mean, I think we can say to a very great degree, America, and until now the war is happening in America, but America was based very firmly on the belief in God. Very firmly. In God we trust, right? God we trust. That the whole basis of America was freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, but freedom of religion. I think that's the first, isn't it the first, the Constitution was, or was this freedom of speech? I think freedom of religion. I'm not that expert. Anyway, freedom of religion is right there in the beginning of the Constitution of America, the Bill of Rights, whatever, that freedom of religion. Like I said, not freedom from religion. The belief in God was very basic in America. That was one of the basic things. The American Revolution was a impetus, an inspiration for the French Revolution, but the American Revolution did not embrace the freedom of spirit of the French Revolution. America didn't want anything to do that much with the French Revolution. Even though France supported the American Revolution, but America did not want to, because France had this thing, it was more based on democracy, people rule, and America was based on a republic, that the people choose the representatives, and the representatives are responsible to the people, but not that everybody does what they want. America was based on responsibility. Okay, in any case, the French Revolution was a very basic force in all the values and government systems of the Western culture. After that, that was one of the big, how do you say, if you want to say the powerful arguments of the Arab countries against Western civilization is that Western civilization is godless, it's debauched, it's, how do you say, decadent. And the Arab countries, they claimed at least they have, you catch a person doing a decadent thing, you throw them off a building, whatever it is. They had this idea of the freedom of the individual was not prime in the Arab countries, in the Muslim countries, and it was primal in the European countries. It also crept into very much into American culture also. This idea of decadence, and okay, until it says here, until the French Revolution, that France was totally in the hands of the king and of the queen. They are the one that did according to what they wanted to, the king and the queen. And the revolution was based on that man should be free and should be able to do what he wanted to. Therefore, they evicted the king and the queen in order that they should be free from their rulership. That the conduct of the country should be by means of the people. People should rule. That was a new thing. Right? Before that, in all the countries of Europe were kings. Kings ruled. The kings had a big problem with the church, with this, but nevertheless, the kings ruled. The people were all subjects. And France started, no, the people will rule. Even though that there is in this a good quality, Shemetosef, Chafesh Begashmiut, that it added on freedom, personal freedom. And that the kings, when they became how do you say, they become despots. They started ruling they weren't accountable to anybody, the kings. By it means that the kings would be done away with, as that would add on a little bit of honesty, accountability. But and this would bring to freedom and also to the Jewish people. But Mikivan Shadavar Lo Hushta, because it was not founded on faith in God, which is not the case to kings. So the kings always had to explain themselves that this is what God wants. But after the kings were deposed, nobody even had to explain themselves. They weren't accountable to anybody. So this brought, therefore, with it a gishish, a chafish baruch, they were free spiritually, free from religion, casting off any sort of yoke or limitations. Davar she'ishpia od kama medinos, and many other countries at that time and other times afterwards, that people cast off any yoke of godliness whatsoever. Mitam Zeh, for this reason, the Alter Rebbe was very, very opposed to France. And he even prayed that they would lose the war, even to the degree that because he refused to be under the leadership of France, Borach, he had to run away with all of his family and all the properties that he had from Liadi. That's where he was in Liadi. Until naturally, because of this, he died. He died in a place called Kfar Piana, right? It was cold, and the Alter Rebbe was older. And finally, while he was fleeing from Napoleon was still winning the battles. He was still winning, and the Alter Rebbe was running away from him. And the Alter Rebbe passed away. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe could have avoided all this if he just would have joined all the other rabbis and said, "Okay, I hope that Napoleon wins. I'll support him." He wouldn't have had to run away. Alter Rebbe even promised Admor Emtsai Ad Kedei Shavua. It was almost like an oath that Russia will win the war. But and so it was. By means of this, Nitzlu Az, and they used the Jewish people, Bahashpa, Bilti Ratsuya. The Jewish people were saved from bad influences. Shayatayim Sarfat, that if France would have conquered Russia, that the Jewish people, there were a lot of Jews in Russia. The Rebbe once even said that it could be there's more Jews even today in Russia than the whole world put together, but they just don't know that they're Jews. There were a lot of Jews in Russia. If France would have won, then the Jews would have been under the influence, the libertine influence of Napoleon. The no morals. Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, then afterwards, and because Napoleon lost, so now the Jewish people could continue serving God in heaven, especially by means of the revelation of Torah Chassidut in France, by means of our rabbis that came after Admor Zakin. So in this, we can see the big novelty that it was, especially in our generation. Now again, what does Chassidut do? Chassidut does what Moses couldn't do. Moses did not change the inside of the Jewish people. He did not make them independent of the world. Moses did not reveal in the Jews their essential connection to God. He just showed them what God could do, how much God loves them, etc. The idea of Chassidut is to arouse our inner essence, like it was with Abraham, to arouse our inner love of God, independent from the world. So Napoleon, he was a worldly man. Napoleon said, I want you to get pleasure from the world. And Chassidut Chabad said, I want you to get pleasure from God and God alone. And if you want to enjoy the world, secondary, that's okay. But the main thing is you have to be devoted totally to the creator of the world. And then if you want to buy a nice car, you want to buy a nice house, but it's not your house anymore. It's not your house car. It's God's car. It's God's. In simple language, don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. Don't think that I'm serving God and really I'm serving myself. Chassidut makes it that a person will always check himself to see, am I really doing what God wants or am I doing what I want? Do I really love Hashem or do I just love myself? Chassidut comes from the inside. That's the whole novelty of the power of Chassidut, that it will change the Jews inside. I heard someone say that Moses took the Jews out of Egypt and the Chassidut takes the Egypt out of the Jews. With these, we see the novelty in our generation in regarding France, the power and the completion power of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. What's the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe? What did he do? What's he got to do with France? We believe, notwithstanding the fact that this country, France, was Bizmanim Ahim back then in the time of the Alter Rebbe. It was B'tokef HaKlipa, was the ultimate Klipa evil. France was evil. V'hitnagda, and it opposed to any sort of conduct. France was opposed to any sort of conduct which indicated the fear of God, fear of doing what God doesn't want. Ubafran, and especially France, was against Chassidut, to love God, to be excited about God. And because of that, you withhold yourself from pleasures of the world. Should begin kach, he'd naged Admor Zok, and therefore the Alter Rebbe was powerfully opposed l'nitzchano, to the victory of France, like we said before. Agam bedorot ha'achreza, and even the generations that came after the Alter Rebbe, the second Rebbe, the third Rebbe of Chabad, actually that the situation in France was lo mesugal, it was not proper, propitious, v'yirat shamayim, that there should be any fear of God in France. They say that when the Rebbe was in France for a while, he learned in the Sorbonne, they say that when the Rebbe was there in France, that he didn't wear a kippah. It was dangerous to walk around on the streets and indicate that you were a Jew, a religious Jew. Religious Jew. So the Rebbe used to wear a wig. That's what they say. The Rebbe used to have a wig, and a toupee, whatever it is, he would put on his head, and he had a hat that he put on the toupee. Well, any cases when he would take off his hat, so his head would also be covered in France, because France was not a place that you demonstrated the fear of God. Wasn't a place. Could be that in synagogues, you went in a synagogue, okay, the religious people, that's okay. In France, there was a separation between church and state. So you want to be a religious Jew, the synagogue, right? Like being a religious, any other religion. But in the streets, in the public places, you didn't demonstrate any sort of religious thing, unless maybe you were a big rabbi or something. Could be the priests. They could walk around. Right? I think even with the priests, I think that demonstrating any sort of religious Judaism was already, walking on thin ice. Walking on thin ice. Also all by all the rabbis and Chabad, they didn't have any permanent place in France. But now, says the Rebbe, Nishtana Matzah, the situation has changed. From one diametrical opposites. What do they call it? From one end to the other. Asher lozu bilavad, not only that the light and the holiness, that the light of holiness, he reached from one place, from Russia to France, that the Rebbe's visited there. But there are Jews that actually learn Torah, reveal Torah, the Talmud, inside of the Torah, Chassidut, and they do commandments and they have fear of God. They're actually living there in France for an extended amount of time. And especially they were there as emissaries of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he's the leader of our generation. Previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Let's have a picture of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe for 1 second. Here we go. Let me see. Okay. Picture of the Rebbe. Here, see? Picture of the previous Rebbe. That's the previous Rebbe. You can look it up. Okay. He was the one who really founded, he broke the ice in a permanent way, and he put Chabad into France in a permanent way, that there would actually be institutions of Chabad. The e-school, they learned over there, they're working over there, learning Torah and doing the commandments, behidur, in how do you say, in the best way, the most special advertised way. And they even wrote Chidushei Torah. There's even novel ideas of Torah that come out from France. There's also additional Jews. The Makomot Acherim, they're printing Torah ideas in France and sending them out to other places. There could be made books from the teachings of the rabbis of France. It used to be in the time of Rashi and those people, but recently, okay, and now, one second, no, I skipped that. Okay. And especially after the Second World War, there has come over there into France with divine intervention. The Jews come from all sorts of different countries until this country of France has become a center of Torah and learning and spreading out Torah and Judaism in general, and spreading out the ideas of Hasidut especially. After World War II, I mean, everybody saw that Germany was the big enemy of the world, and that Germany hated Jews. So the Jews were like bunched together with the whole rest of the world, France included. So they had a common enemy, and the common enemy was pure evil. So therefore, Jews, even religious Jews settling in France, it didn't bother the people in France as much as it did previously. By means of this, that there are many institutions of Torah and prayer, including and especially Tomchei Tamimim, Lubavitch in France, and also Achei Tamimim. Achei Tamimim is like the high school level of Torah. Adkam of Snifim, and also institutions of education in general, Al Tarat HaKodesh, institutions that learning even secular subjects, for learning it Al Tarat HaKodesh in a holy way. They stop for praying. They only learn things that are permissible according to the Torah. But Nosov, in addition, Madpisim, they also print books of revealed Torah and Penimis Torah and ideas of Hasidut. Novel, interesting books of Torah are coming out from France. It was the big enemy of Judaism. The big novelty is especially when Kashem, just like Shezen Nogea Ba'avod of Klolit Olam, just like this is relevant to the whole entire world, that from generation to generation, Higio Yehudim, that Jews have been reaching, spreading out to the whole entire world further and further, in order to bring over there a refinement of the world. Shahari Shleimut Abira, the completion of the refinement of the world, is when Jews are in a place and they go according to the customs of that place, as long as it doesn't conflict with Torah, and they use those customs in order to add on service of God, the language of the place, whatever the customs of the place. And similarly, it's also relevant to the service of our Rebbes of Chabad, when they spread out the idea of Judaism and Hasidut out in these faraway places. Asher b'meshach in the course of time, Nitvosef, there was added more and more until our generation. Nitvosef, there was added on also refinement of this country of France, Tzarfat, Mibali Hebed, notwithstanding the fact that this used to be the lowest of the lowest places. In other words, what's the biggest enemy of Judaism? Right? What's the biggest enemy of Judaism? Revealed enemies or concealed enemies? Revealed enemies, that was like the Tsar. The Tsar was the church. They were openly opposed to Judaism. They wanted desperately and openly that every Jew should leave Judaism and every Jew should be in their religion. Everyone. And they did it openly, and they openly opposed, and miraculously Judaism survived in Russia. Miraculously. It was incredible. It was always bad for the Jews in Russia. In Poland and almost all the other countries, Germany, there were big, long periods where it was really good for the Jews in those countries. It was very good. In Poland, there was glorious times for the Jewish people in Poland until Khmelnytsky and those things, but there was glorious time. Same thing with Italy. All those places were good. In Russia, was always bad. In Russia, there were always decrees against the Jews. There was always pogroms all the time, constantly. Right? They never reached to the levels of the Holocaust, and the Jews were never evicted from Russia like they were from England and from Portugal and from Spain, those places. But nevertheless, it was always bad for the Jews in Russia, bad. But spiritually, it wasn't bad. And therefore, the Rebbe even supported the Tsar over Napoleon. But Napoleon was a nice guy. Napoleon was friendly to the Jews. Napoleon was open. He understood Judaism. He understood what the Jewish people are. He understood the needs of the Jewish people. He understood the customs of the Jewish people. Napoleon was a genius, open person, amazing, right? That's the big enemy of Judaism. That's the enemy. Why? Because he affected the Jewish soul, that the Jewish soul would be dependent on the good of Napoleon. And in Russia, the Jewish soul was only dependent on the good of God. So the Alter Rebbe favored the Tsar. And now it's come to the point where religious Jews are in France, and there's institutions of Jews in France, and they're learning Torah in France, and even learning Hasidut in France, and they're even using the customs of the place, as in the time before, in the time of the Alter Rebbe, then the customs of the country, they were opposed to Judaism. They're opposed to Judaism. And because of this, the Alter Rebbe was opposed to Napoleon, because the customs of France were, freedom, have a good time, do whatever you want to, with whoever you want to, whatever, how you want to, when you want to. That was France, right? Being free, having a good time. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe was opposed. Right? In France, what do they say? You want to be Jewish, be religious. You want to be religious, be religious. Everybody does what they want. All of a sudden, the Jewish people started thinking, 1 second, let me try a little bit of what my next door neighbor is doing. If you can do whatever you want, I don't know. Maybe it's good. It's like Adam, with a tree. Maybe it looks good. I'm going to do it. That was the custom. That was the whole atmosphere of France. Freedom. And it drew people to stop thinking about anything Jewish, just to be part of the world. What's the problem? And so therefore the Alter Rebbe was very against it. But now what is there, Yashvu b'Medina Zu, now there are Jews living in France in our generation, and this is all because of the power of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, like we're going to learn further. And now they have come down and they have refined the country until exactly the opposite. We are using the customs of that country, of France, the language of the country, whatever it is, in order to spread out Judaism and the Torah and Judaism and even the ideas of Hasidut, to spread them out even in France to the whole, and the Rebbe says even in the whole world. And they said, we can say this, that France has been conquered. So in other words, France was the ultimate opposition to Judaism. The ultimate opposition to Judaism. It put it threw water, it quenched the flame of godliness that's inside of every Jew. What is it that so now France has become transformed? Says the Rebbe, that's the sign that Moshiach is here. And this all began because of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Let's go over here. What are we going to do over here? Start the share. Let's do the Yom.